Hey everyone, Dustin here, Jagged Brush Studios, here with the 5th Trooper Network with another how-to hobby video. Hope you guys enjoyed the last basing video that I did. If not, you can go find it on the 5th Trooper Network list. This time, I kind of wanted to focus on how to get started in the hobbying part of the hobby, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I get asked frequently, what do I need to start? What kind of tools do I need to start? It's so expensive, and realistically, it does not have to be. So I've got a real quick guide that I'm going to put together and hopefully show you guys within the next few minutes or so what I would recommend that you go ahead and get started with to help you get ready with the hobby. So first things first, even before you need paint, is you need some tools to help you with your miniatures. So you're going to need some form of super glue, depending on what you're working with. This is what I use. This is what I prefer. Or if you're working with hard plastic miniatures like the Star Wars Legion droids, you can use some of this Tamiya extra thin cement. I actually recommend this for the hard plastic miniatures. But this will work in a pinch. Super glue, I like the gel, like the control it provides you. And this has always been my go-to super glue product. So can't go wrong with a good super glue. That's going to help you get your miniatures put together. When you're starting to put your miniatures together, it may be helpful to have some form of an X-Acto knife. There's many different brands out there. This is the one that I use. I've used it for years. Simple enough. I know how to use it, keep my blade sharp, and I don't have to worry about any of the extra fancy frills that come with an X-Acto knife. It does the job that I ask for it to do. A couple bucks there, not going to cost you much. I think you can probably get one of these for $3-4 US. I'm not sure what that's going to be overseas. The next tool that I like having, but definitely not a necessity because you can do what this next tool does with your X-Acto knife, is going to be a seam line remover. So it's got these little scrapey points on each end, and what you can do is if you take your miniature, you find your mold lines. I think I called it a seam line remover. Mold lines. You find your mold lines and you can scrape this along the mold lines, and it's going to help you clean that off. You don't have to have one of these. Definitely not 100% necessity. You can do the same thing with the back edge of your hobby knife, and you just scrape it along that way instead of using the sharp edge. So I've got it like that, and you can scrape it along and it will help clean those mold lines off. This miniature does not have any. I've done it already. So X-Acto mold line remover, we're getting started. The next thing that's going to be helpful for you to have are some files. Not a necessity again, but I like them. I bought this set of Army Painter hobby files. They're diamond files. They work great for me. And what that's going to help you do is get off some of those sprue marks where when something is clipped onto a sprue here, I've got some Marvel Crisis Protocol bases here, but when you clip off this point here, there's going to leave a little bit of mark. A nice file will help you smooth it out so it doesn't show up with your paint. That being said, a nice set of hobby clippers are going to be useful if you're working with sprues. For many of the Star Wars Legion miniatures, you don't need them. They're soft plastic. They don't come on sprues. But they're moving more and more towards the hard sprues. Nice pair of hobby clippers can be had for $10 or so. I think the files probably run you about $12, but again, they're not a necessity. An X-Acto knife is, and I do think that a pair of hobby clippers are a necessity. So now that you're ready to start, you've got your miniatures taken off, you've got them assembled with your glue, you're going to need to get to the point to where you prime them. Some miniatures require that you wash them. Not all of them do. I don't typically wash my Star Wars Legion miniatures. They prime just fine for me. When it comes to priming, you have aerosol options. You can use brands like Krylon, make a decent primer. Make sure it's safe on plastics. Read those labels. Make sure that it's safe on plastics so you don't have to worry about it. I do all of my priming indoors so that I don't have to worry about weather. How to prime can be a whole other video in and of itself, but since I do my priming indoors, I use this brand of Res. It works. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's made by Badger. It runs through my airbrush just fine. As you can see, I'm not clean when I pour it. I have 3 different colors, gray, white, and black, and that allows me to do zenithal highlighting. But Res, you can also apply this with a brush. I like it. It's really smooth. It adheres well, and it's self-leveling so that it doesn't obscure too many of your details as long as you don't put it on too heavily. So this stuff can be a little bit pricey. I think it's like $17 for this 3-pack of I want to say they're 4 ounces each bottle, but definitely goes a long way. So you've got your miniature assembled, you've got the mold lines all cleaned up, and you've got it primed, what do you do next? Well, you need paint. There's many different brands of paint out there. Star Wars Legion has its own line of paints. I personally, if you can't tell, use primarily Army Painter paints. There's a company out there called P3. They make a decent set of paints. There's obviously Citadel. More commonly, you're going to see these new ones, Citadel. They make decent paints as well. I own some of them. I enjoy them. But I would say a very vast majority of my... sorry for the bump, but I had to close my drawer. Very vast majority of my paints are from Army Painter. If you do end up going the Army Painter route, I would recommend that you get from them a set of steel agitator balls. They're not very expensive. And what you do is you put these in your... you put those in your Army Painter bottles, and it helps you shake them up. If you could hear that, that was me shaking one of the bottles. It's definitely a necessity for Army Painter paints. They have a starter set. I think their starter set, the one I'd recommend is 50 paints for like 80 bucks, 90 bucks. You can get smaller sets than that. I know it's a very large upfront cost, so if you have to, you can resort to using craft store apple barrel paints. They're $1 a bottle. They go a long ways. I would not strongly recommend them. I primarily use them for terrain. They're great for terrain because they're cheap and you use a lot on terrain. But as far as miniature painting, the pigments bits are too large, and I find that they don't thin out very well, which, again, another thing you'll need to do is thin your paints. And in order to thin your paints, you're going to need some form of paint palette. So you have a couple options here. You have a traditional plastic well palette that you have here. I use these for different things. And then your other option is going to be a wet palette. A wet palette allows you to put your paint on there, and they stay wet for a longer period of time. So this paint was from my session last night. It's primarily still wet. You can see I got gold on my finger just from touching it. So I do like the Army Painter model. It has a place for some brushes in there, and it allows you to do that. So you're looking at 25 bucks for this wet palette. You can get these for a couple bucks at the store, or you can build your own wet palette for a few dollars with some items at home. But that would be another video for me on how to assemble that. Alright, so you've got your paint, you've got your stuff, your miniature assembled. How do we apply our paint? Well, you're going to need some brushes. This is typically where most people that I run into go a little bit overkill. When you're just starting out, you do not need to buy these fancy pants Winsor & Newton brushes. I've gotten some paint on the handle of this one. I probably have a nicer one somewhere. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to bother trying to find it. But you do not need to buy the top of the line brushes when you're just starting out, because you're going to mess them up. I promise you, you will mess them up. You're going to get paint up in the ferrule, which is, when you're talking about, it's this metal part up here on the brushes. You're going to get paint up in there, paint gets up in there and it dries, and then your brushes splay out everywhere, and everyone's like, why are my brushes splitting? 9 times out of 10, it's because you have paint up in the ferrule. So do yourself a favor, go to your local craft and hobby store and buy a budget pack of brushes. These are Royal Taklon synthetic brushes. If I beat these up, I don't care. It's $12 for like an 8-pack of them. Another thing you can do is on Amazon, they have a 50-pack of size 1 brushes. I have those that I use for practice. They're nothing special. They work great for me. And if I mess one up, I throw it away and grab another one out of the pack. So if you do want to get decent brushes that are not that expensive, my go-to brushes typically are Army Painter brand. So if you had to buy only 3 brushes, here's what I'd recommend. Get yourself a Army Painter Regiment brush, an Army Painter Detail brush, and an Army Painter Monster brush. So 3 decently sized brushes that are going to probably paint most of your army for you. If you were going off of sizes, I recommend you get a size 1, a size 2, and a size 0 brush. Those are going to be the 3 that you use the most. I do a bulk of my painting with a size 2. Alright, you're going to need just a couple other brushes. The next one can be found at the dollar store in the makeup aisle. What this is this brand is Elf, but it's an eyeshadow brush. And this is great for dry brushing. So when we cover dry brushing, this is what this is good for. And I think I paid a grand total of $2 for this. So when I'm done with this, I chuck it away and I buy a new one. Also helpful is to have a flat dry brush. This is a size 8 Princeton brand. I think I got it for $3 at a hobby shop somewhere, or an art supply store somewhere. It's a flat brush, and it's great for dry brushing also. And that's really it. That's all you need to get started as far as applying brush. To take care of your brushes, the last thing I would recommend is some form of brush soap. When you're done for the day, use one of these 2 brush soaps. I like the Gentastics Drucken Brush Goop. I found it and have fallen in love with it since. However, this master stuff is much easier to find, and you can get this at most craft stores like Michael's, Hobby Lobby in the US. A couple bucks, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to keep your brushes nice and clean and try to keep that point on there. So after each session, run your brush through some of there, get a nice lather, rub it on your hand, rinse it off with some water. It helps bring the points back on your brushes. So brush soap, and that's about it. So all said and done, if you were to buy your brushes, let's say you went with the Army Painter. Let's say you got, last thing is a pair of tweezers. They're really helpful for putting stuff together. But let's see how much we're running up to roughly US to get started with just these tools here, which would be a very good start to any hobby collection. I'm going to take the seam brush out. So if you had all of these, and let's put that brush soap there. If you had all of this to get started with your thing and a wet palette, a palette. You can get these for about $8. It comes with the set of tweezers on if you look on Amazon. So those come together. Your palette can be found for about $3. Your X-Acto knife is about $4. Each of these Army Painter brushes run about $7, and this runs about $2. So 2, 9, 16, 20, 28, 30, 1, and your brush cleaner is going to be about $5 to $8 depending on what you get. So I'm going to start with $8. $40, you've got all your stuff to start. Add another $4 for some kind of super glue. $45, you're good to start the hobbying side of the aspect, excluding paint. Paint is going to be pricey, but it is a very initial upfront cost, and your paint, as long as you are sparing with it, will last you a very long time. So if you bought a small starter set of paint, you're looking at $100 tops to get started into the hobby. The good thing about the Army Painter 50 pack is that it comes with a regiment brush, so you don't have to buy that already. But yeah, you can get started in this hobby for a relatively realistic amount of paint. That's 2 squads of miniatures from Legion. Is $50 to get started here minus the paint. Find what paint you like, buy that, and you're good to go. All right, so that's what I would recommend to get started. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you all. I will answer any comments or questions that come up. But again, thanks for stopping on by. This is Dustin with Jagged Brush Studios with the 5th Trooper Network, and I hope to see you all out there hobbying more often. Have a great day.